The man who knocked on my door with my own face. It started with a quiet knock, late at night. I lived alone, and no one knew my apartment number. I hesitated, then peeked through the peephole. A man stood there, my face staring back at me, frozen in a grin I had never worn. I stumbled backward. My heart thumped painfully, chest tightening as the figure waited silently. His eyes, mine, locked with mine through the glass. I blinked, shook my head, thinking it was a trick of the streetlight or fatigue. The knock came again, louder this time. My mind screamed that it shouldn't be real, but reality bent subtly with each heartbeat. The door shivered under the force, though I had not touched it. I checked the security camera. Nothing. Just the empty hallway, dimly lit, quiet. Yet I could feel eyes on me, lingering, patient, waiting. I tried calling the police, but the line was dead. Every number I dialed led only to silence, then faint laughter that sounded like me. I dropped the phone, hands shaking. The next knock was different. It rapped the rhythm of my heartbeat. The figure's lips didn't move, but I heard words. Open up. I've been waiting. My blood froze. I pulled a knife from the kitchen drawer. My reflection in the polished metal of the blade stared back with the same grin. I realized with horror it was not the mirror. It was him, somehow inside every reflective surface. I barricaded the door with chairs, tables, anything I could shove. The knocks turned into thuds, stomps, like footsteps pressing through wood. Each impact sounded eerily like my own steps. If you're still watching, subscribe before someone knocks with your face on their door. I fled to the bathroom, locked myself in, breathing shallow. I could hear the hallway breathing, too, slow and deliberate, echoing mine. Shadows stretched across the floor, elongating, folding, twisting toward me. I considered jumping from the fire escape. The man would be waiting below, grinning the same way I did when I brushed my teeth, when I combed my hair. His patience was infinite, just like mine had been until now. My phone vibrated on the floor. A text message appeared from my own number. I'm inside. Let me in. The wallpaper in the hallway rippled as if it were liquid, forming shapes that mimicked me in impossible poses. I tried calling out to the neighbors. Silence. Only faint laughter echoed back, my own voice answering, distorted, hollow. I pressed my hands to my ears. It did no good. The man waited, always waited. I could hear him breathing through the door now, even though I could see no shadow, no shape, no hand. Only the grin remained. I tried to run, but the apartment seemed to stretch, elongating corridors, twisting walls. The exit became unreachable, a distant memory I could almost touch but never reach. Objects moved on their own. A chair tilted slightly toward the door. My reflection appeared in a picture frame that didn't contain a mirror, grinning wider than before. The knocking evolved into a whisper. Words I didn't speak, thoughts I didn't think echoed in my head. The man, my double, had learned me. He was patient, intelligent, waiting for the exact moment I broke. I hid under the bed, trembling, knife clutched. A shadow passed above me. My reflection in the floorboards stared back with my own terrified eyes. He was everywhere and nowhere. The clock ticked slowly, impossibly. Every second stretched into eternity. My apartment, my life, bent around him. The door shivered under invisible hands, calling, coaxing, promising something I couldn't refuse. I realized I could never leave. He was patient, intelligent, inevitable. Any attempt to escape would fail. Any attempt to resist would only teach him more about me. Tonight, I hear the knock again. I know the grin is waiting, and I know it is mine. The stranger in my window waves at me every night. It started subtly. A shadow flickered across the blinds as I was brushing my teeth. At first, I thought it was a trick of the streetlight, or a neighbor passing by. But the shape lingered, unmoving, observing. That night, I woke to a soft tapping on the glass. My heart thumped violently. Through the window, a figure stood, tall and thin, with a hat pulled low. The shadow raised its hand and waved, slowly, deliberately. I froze. My apartment was on the 5th floor. No one should have been there. No one could have climbed this high. Yet the figure waved again, smiling faintly beneath the hat, motioning as if greeting an old friend. The next night it returned, same hour, same posture. I tried to stay awake, watching, but every time I blinked, it disappeared. My walls began to feel fragile, like a thin barrier separating me from something impossible. Objects shifted subtly when it appeared. My keys moved. A chair nudged forward. Shadows stretched unnaturally toward the window. I realized the stranger wasn't just outside. It was testing the apartment, mapping it, learning its contours. If you're still watching, subscribe before someone waves at your window while you sleep. I tried recording it. Video showed only the empty balcony. Yet in person, I saw the thin silhouette, its hand raised, its smile subtle but familiar in a way that shouldn't exist. The stranger didn't speak. It didn't leave. Sometimes it moved slightly between gestures, tilting its head to watch me through the glass. I felt an awareness in its posture, a sentience that chilled me to the bone. I closed the blinds one night, hoping it would vanish. When I reopened them, the figure was inside the apartment, standing a few feet behind me in the reflection of the window. Its hand waved slowly, silently, waking. Sleep became impossible. Every time I dozed, I would wake to feel the shadow leaning over me. My dreams were invaded. The figure stood at impossible angles, always waving, always smiling faintly. I tried leaving the apartment. The shadow followed. Reflections in passing store windows showed it behind me. In cars, in mirrors, always waving, always patient, waiting for me to return home. Objects moved in synchronization with it. Cups tipped slightly. Lights flickered. A breeze moved where no window was open. I realized it wasn't bound by normal rules. It was patient, aware, persistent. The stranger learned my schedule, my habits. Every night, it adapted. Sometimes it appeared closer, sometimes farther, always testing the boundaries of fear, drawing me into obedience without a single word spoken. I attempted to confront it directly. I opened the window, shouted, demanded it leave. The figure merely tilted its head, smiled faintly, and waved again, as if my presence only amused it, strengthened it. Time became distorted. Minutes stretched into hours. Days bled together. The stranger's appearances became more frequent, its waving more deliberate. My apartment felt like a cage. My own home transformed into an observation room. The final night, I tried to flee. As I ran down the hallway, every reflective surface showed the same thin figure waving at me, even in places it physically could not be. I realized there was no escape. It waits now. Outside, inside, everywhere. Its hand raised, its smile quiet but infinitely patient. And it will keep waving until I do something I cannot undo. The visitor who entered my house without moving. It was a quiet evening. I was sitting on my couch, headphones on, scrolling through my phone, when I felt a cold pressure against my back, like someone had leaned over me. I spun around. Nothing. The living room was empty. No doors open, no windows unlocked, no trace of anyone else. I shook my head and laughed nervously, attributing it to fatigue or a draft. Yet the feeling lingered, pressing against my skin like unseen fingers. Moments later, I heard a soft creak from the hallway. The sound was familiar, too familiar, like my own weight moving across the floor. But I had not stood. My heart raced as the creak repeated, deliberate, echoing unnaturally through the apartment. I grabbed a flashlight. Shining it down the hallway, I saw nothing. The shadows stretched unnaturally, flickering with the movement of something invisible. A cold breath grazed my neck. I spun again. Empty. The pressure remained. It was then I realized it had entered my home without a door, without a window, without footsteps. There was no way it should have been there, yet I could feel its presence, patient, watching, waiting. I tried to rationalize. Perhaps a hallucination, perhaps a prank. Yet every object in the room seemed subtly shifted from where I remembered. A book tilted slightly. A cup on the table rotated an impossible degree. If you're still listening, subscribe before someone enters your home without ever moving. The room felt alive. Each shadow flickered like breathing. My reflections multiplied unnaturally in glass surfaces, each mirror showing a figure that mimicked me, but moved independently, waiting, observing, patient. I called my friend, whispering details. When I returned my gaze to the living room, the flashlight's beam caught something impossible. The outline of a person standing silently behind the couch. Its edges blurred, translucent, yet unmistakably human. I froze. The figure did not step forward, did not blink, did not breathe. Yet I could feel its awareness pressing against me, measuring me, counting my heartbeats. It had entered, and now it waited, as though time itself slowed in its presence. I ran to the door. Locked. All doors locked. No signs of forced entry. No way in, no way out. Yet here it was, waiting, calm, patient. The room seemed to pulse with its awareness, like a living organism surrounding me with invisible walls. Objects moved again. My chair shifted slightly. My coffee cup rolled a few centimeters. A pen toppled off the table. It did not touch them, yet everything responded as though it had. A presence beyond physics, intelligent, observing, calculating. I attempted to leave the apartment again. As I passed the kitchen, I caught a glimpse of my reflection in the stainless steel fridge. Behind me, the figure leaned closer, not stepping, not moving, but present. Its face was indistinct, blurred like a dream, yet it radiated patience and intelligence. I barricaded the living room door, using furniture, books, anything heavy. It did not attempt to break the barrier. It waited, patient, unmoving, as if time and physics bent around its presence. I tried recording it with my phone. Playback revealed nothing, just an empty room. Yet every time I looked through the camera lens, I felt it closer. My reflection appeared in the screen's glass. Not mine, but a distorted, grinning version of me. Sleep became impossible. Each time I closed my eyes, the pressure returned. Shadows in my dreams twisted into shapes resembling it. Its awareness filled every space I thought was private, every corner I believed safe. I tried contacting building security. No one responded. The front desk appeared empty, and yet I could hear faint movements behind the walls, soft shuffling, like someone pacing without touching the floor. The figure began to show up in mirrors and windows, always at impossible angles. I saw it behind me reflected in windows across the street. I turned. Empty. Only reflections revealed it. Only reflections confirmed its presence. I noticed patterns. Every object it seemed near moved subtly over time. The apartment itself was adapting to it. My personal space was bending to accommodate a being that existed outside normal rules. Attempts to confront it failed. I tried speaking aloud, demanding it leave. Silence answered. I tried throwing objects at it. They passed through. I tried leaving. I returned to find the layout subtly altered. Furniture shifted, doorways narrower, ceilings lower. I began documenting everything, writing down each movement, each subtle shift. The figure mirrored my actions, appearing in reflections whenever I stopped writing, waiting. It learned my habits, my fears, cataloged my reactions. Time lost meaning. Nights bled into days. I began noticing subtle changes in myself. Phrases I had never spoken. Gestures I did not remember making. The visitor had integrated itself into my life, my reality, without a single step. It was patient, infinite patience. I realized it did not need to move. Every attempt to act, to resist, to escape only fed its understanding, its control. It existed beyond movement, beyond time, beyond my comprehension. One night, I whispered a question into the silence. "Who are you?" The shadows coalesced slightly, just enough to make me feel observed. I heard a faint breath, a presence that did not exist yet was undeniable. No words were spoken. None were needed. Every night it grows closer in subtle ways. Objects tilt toward it, shadows elongate, reflections linger longer than they should. Its presence pervades my apartment. Every corner, every space, every private area has become its domain. I know it will never leave. It does not need to move to follow me. It does not need hands to touch. Its awareness stretches beyond the limits of what I once believed possible. I cannot escape. The visitor has entered, and it waits, patient, knowing, watching, and I will never truly be alone again. The woman at the bus stop, who knew my secrets. I first noticed her one rainy evening. Standing under the dim glow of the bus stop light, she didn't carry an umbrella. Her clothes were soaked, clinging to her in a way that made her seem unreal. She stared at me, but not directly. Her gaze followed me as if she already knew where I had been. At first, I assumed it was coincidence. Another late commuter. But the next night, I passed the same stop. She was there again. Same soaked coat, same faint smile, same unnerving calm. My gut told me this wasn't normal. I slowed down, pretending to check my phone. She whispered my name, just barely audible over the rain, and smiled wider. I froze. My voice, my name, spoken by someone I had never met. My pulse shot up. The third night, I approached her. "Do I know you?" I asked, voice shaking. She tilted her head, wet hair clinging to her face, and whispered secrets I had never spoken aloud. Things I hadn't told anyone, not even my journal. If you're still watching, subscribe before someone begins speaking your secrets aloud. I stumbled back, horrified. The rain fell harder, but she didn't seem wet. Her presence was impossible. Each secret she spoke was more private than the last, drawn from corners of my mind I didn't realize were visible. I ran home, shaking. Locks clicked behind me, yet I felt her gaze even through the walls. My apartment, usually my sanctuary, suddenly felt permeable. She had crossed some boundary I didn't understand. The next morning, I saw her in reflections. The coffee shop window, the bathroom mirror at work, even in the small reflective surfaces of my phone screen. She was there, smiling faintly, whispering. Always whispering secrets only I could hear. I tried to ignore it. I avoided the bus stop entirely. Yet I began noticing subtle signs. Items I'd misplaced lying exactly where she would be if she were real. Shadows that bent unnaturally toward her presence. Whispers echoing faintly in the hallways. She began to appear at impossible places. I would glance at a crosswalk, a bookstore, or even my office parking lot, and there she was, standing, watching, waiting, smiling faintly. No one else noticed. Only I could see her. The whispers grew louder. Sometimes I would hear my own thoughts repeated back, twisted slightly, as if filtered through her mind. Secrets I had not yet thought, things I had not yet done, were suddenly known, anticipated. Objects moved subtly when she appeared. A notebook slid a few inches across a table. A pen rolled to the edge. My apartment, my office, public spaces, all responded to her invisible touch, evidence of her impossible presence. Sleep became impossible. Every dream featured her. She would stand at impossible angles, whispering what I feared most, my own thoughts becoming dialogue, turning nightmares into guided tours through my own secrets. I tried talking to friends. Describing her made them frown, uncomfortable, yet none could see her. None could hear her whispers. I began questioning my own sanity. Was she a hallucination or something else entirely? One evening, I followed her. She moved with impossible fluidity, ignoring physics, passing through alleyways and fences, always just out of reach. The closer I got, the more my surroundings warped. Buildings bent, lights flickered, streets stretched unnaturally, guiding me toward her presence. I noticed her face shifting subtly. Sometimes my own features appeared, mirrored, blurred. My secrets spoken aloud, mirrored in her expressions. She wasn't just an observer. She was shaping perception, bending reality to reflect my fears, my shame, my hidden thoughts. Time distorted. Hours passed like minutes. Days bled together. She adapted to every attempt to evade her. She anticipated my route, my stops, my pauses. No matter where I went, the whispers found me, always correct, always precise. I attempted to confront her directly, standing under a streetlight and demanding answers. She smiled faintly, tilting her head, voice soft but precise. You cannot hide from yourself. I only tell what you already know. Her words were both true and impossible. She had knowledge of my hidden self, my unspoken actions, my private fears. Every corner of my life, every locked thought, had been exposed to her presence. Objects shifted more violently as the encounters continued. Doors opened slightly, locks clicked. Mirrors reflected movements I had not made. Shadows bent and twisted, reaching toward me in impossible ways. Her presence no longer required proximity. I tried leaving town. Flights, buses, even driving hundreds of miles. It made no difference. In every reflection, in every fleeting glance, she appeared. Smiling, whispering, patient, silent to everyone else, but to me, omnipresent. I attempted to block her out. Headphones, meditation, bright sunlight. Nothing worked. Her whispers invaded every private moment, every thought. My own mind became a theater for her voice, each secret paraded back to me with gentle precision. I began documenting her appearances, noting patterns, but even this became futile. Every note I wrote appeared to shift subtly when I wasn't looking. My handwriting changed, the content adjusted, as if she were editing reality itself. My apartment warped in response to her. Furniture moved subtly when my back was turned. Walls seemed closer in some rooms, expanded in others. Every space I thought secure became a stage for her presence, bending the ordinary into impossible geometry. She began appearing in my own reflections intentionally. Mirrors, windows, phone screens, always whispering secrets I had not yet fully realized, guiding my thoughts, anticipating my questions before I could form them. I tried speaking aloud, asking questions. The responses came immediately, though her lips never moved. Her voice echoed in my skull, clear, precise, intimate. She knew me completely, yet remained patient, waiting, always waiting. Sleep became optional. Dreams were overtaken by her impossible form. My apartment's layout distorted, corridors stretched, rooms shifted. She guided me through spaces that could not exist in normal geometry. One night, I whispered a desperate plea. Why me? She tilted her head, smile widening faintly, and replied without speaking. Because you notice, because you remember, because you are patient enough to see yourself. I realized there was no escape. She did not follow in a conventional sense. Her presence existed in every reflection, every whisper, every shadow. Every secret, every hidden thought was already cataloged, displayed, anticipated. I am now careful with everything I do. My secrets no longer belong to me. They belong to her. Every thought I tried to hide, every gesture, every pause, observed, known, mirrored back, twisted into subtle lessons in control and patience. Tonight, I see her in my window again. She smiles faintly, raising her hand as if to wave. Her eyes, my eyes, lock on mine. The whispers begin softly, recounting thoughts I have not yet had. And I know I will never be free. She is patient, and she knows everything. The intruder who laughed from inside my walls. It started with laughter, low at first, barely audible over the hum of my apartment. I froze, trying to locate the source. The sound seemed to come from within the walls themselves, vibrating through the plaster, intimate yet impossible. I pressed my ear to the hallway wall. The laughter stopped. Silence. My heartbeat pounded so loudly, I thought it might give me away. Then it returned, louder, distorted, almost mocking, echoing behind the drywall as if the building itself had taken a voice. I checked the doors. Locked. Windows sealed. No vents, no crawl spaces, no conceivable opening. Yet the laughter persisted. It was patient, intelligent, aware, mocking me not with words, but with presence. Objects shifted subtly when the laughter appeared. A chair tilted toward the source. A cup quivered on the edge of the counter. The air carried faint vibrations, almost tactile, as though the walls themselves had become a living conduit for this impossible intruder. I tried calling a friend. Phone dead. Every number I dialed led to silence, then faint giggles, warped and distorted, whispering fragments of thoughts I hadn't yet spoken. The walls themselves seemed to know me. If you're still watching, subscribe before laughter begins following you from places it shouldn't exist. I taped the cracks in the walls. I covered vents and inspected corners. Yet each night, the laughter returned. Closer, louder. Sometimes it seemed to echo behind me in reflections. A faint, blurred figure in the hallway mirror, tilting its head, grin faint but unmistakable. Sleep became impossible. The intruder appeared in my dreams as the walls themselves, stretching impossibly, bending into shapes I could not map. Its laughter guided my actions, even while I slept, subtle manipulations in the architecture of my mind. I tried recording the sound. Playback revealed nothing, just silence. Yet every time I returned to the apartment, I felt it again, resonating through the drywall, patient, waiting, intelligent. Doors opened slightly on their own. Floorboards creaked. Shadows shifted against the ceiling, elongating and twisting toward the walls, as if drawn by an unseen gravity. The intruder did not move. It had already infiltrated. I considered leaving, packing a bag, driving away. But as I tried, I realized my perception had warped. The apartment extended in impossible ways. Hallways bent. Doorways stretched into angles that made no sense. The laughter followed, echoing along impossible geometries. I could hear whispers within the laughter. Names I hadn't spoken, thoughts I hadn't had, fears I hadn't recognized. It knew me, all of me, and it was patient, waiting for the moment I could no longer resist. Objects moved more boldly as nights passed. Cups rolled across counters. Drawers opened and closed slightly. Even my furniture leaned toward the walls where the laughter originated, responding to some unseen intelligence. I tried confronting it directly, shouting into the hallway, demanding it stop. Silence answered. Then laughter returned, faint, slow, deliberate, growing louder over hours. It never moved, never approached, yet it was infinitely present. The walls themselves seemed to pulse. I pressed my hands against the plaster and felt subtle vibrations, like the heartbeat of something inside, something patient, aware, and amused by my fear. Time lost meaning. Minutes stretched, hours blurred. Days folded into one another. my perception bent around the laughter. I could no longer distinguish between waking and sleeping, real and imagined. The intruder's presence had become a filter for reality. I began documenting each sound, each movement. Notes shifted subtly when I wasn't looking. My handwriting warped. Sentences twisted. Even my own thoughts felt altered, reshaped by something unseen, patient, intelligent. I noticed patterns. It laughed when I hesitated. It whispered when I tried to speak. It anticipated my actions. Its presence was not bound by conventional rules. It existed beyond motion, beyond space, beyond reason. I tried fleeing again. The hallway stretched impossibly, a twisting labyrinth. Every corner I turned led me back toward the source. The walls pulsed, creaking and bending, guiding me to the impossible center of the apartment where the laughter thrived. I could feel its amusement, gentle, mocking, infinite. My heart raced with fear and awe. It had become part of me, and I part of it. Resistance was futile. Awareness alone was submission. The laughter began to mimic my voice. Words I had whispered alone in my apartment were repeated, twisted, layered into the sound. Even silence was transformed into its expression. I attempted to barricade every wall, every vent, every crevice. It made no difference. The walls themselves seemed alive, responding to its attention. My home was no longer mine. I realized it had never entered physically. It never needed to. Its intelligence existed in the structure, in the spaces I had ignored, in the gaps between what I thought was reality. It simply was. One night, I whispered a question into the dark. Who are you? The laughter ceased for a moment, then returned, soft, deliberate. It was a response, not in words, but in understanding. I felt seen, cataloged, measured. My apartment became a theater for its patience. Each creak, each whisper, each shadow, each tilt of an object, a performance. I was the audience. I was the subject. I was the medium. Time no longer mattered. Sleep was optional. Consciousness itself became an extension of its presence. I could feel it everywhere, in every reflection, every vibration, every corner I had ever ignored. I accepted it, finally. Resistance was impossible. Every heartbeat, every step, every glance through the apartment was monitored, mirrored, cataloged. My life was now inseparable from its observation. Tonight, I hear it again. Laughter, soft, low, patient. From the walls, from nowhere, from everywhere. And I know it will never stop. The neighbors I don't remember moving in. It started quietly. One evening, I heard faint voices drifting from the apartment next door. Odd, since the unit had been empty for months. Curious, I pressed my ear to the wall. Laughter, soft and knowing, seeped through the plaster. I peeked through the peephole. Curtains drawn, lights dim. No movement, no hint of life beyond the faint voices. Yet I could feel their presence, patient and deliberate, as if waiting for me to notice. The next morning, I checked the mailbox. Odd, letters I didn't recognize, addressed to names I had never heard, appeared in my box. I returned them, but the following day, more arrived. The handwriting was impossibly precise, each envelope sealed with meticulous care. That night, I heard a knock at my door. Tentatively, I opened it. Nobody. Only a faint draft and the echo of whispered laughter that sounded unnervingly familiar, almost like my own voice. If you're still listening, subscribe before your neighbors begin speaking through walls you didn't know existed. Days passed. I started noticing subtle changes in the building. Doors slightly misaligned. Carpets that hadn't been there. Shadows shifting in impossible patterns. The empty apartment next door no longer felt vacant. It radiated life, unnatural and silent. I tried asking the building manager. He frowned, confused, and told me the unit had been empty for years. Yet each night, faint voices, laughter, and the smell of something warm and metallic leaked through the walls. I began noticing figures from the corner of my eye, shadows moving behind curtains, silhouettes in windows that should have been dark. They didn't step outside, didn't knock, didn't speak directly. Yet their presence was undeniable, patient, observing. Objects shifted subtly. My door handle felt colder. Keys I left on tables moved slightly. Chairs tilted. I began documenting it all, yet the more I tried to record, the more reality resisted. Cameras captured empty hallways, though I could feel the neighbors' awareness everywhere. The laughter began to mimic me. Not just my voice, but gestures I had made days earlier. My routines were anticipated, mirrored subtly in the walls. I began questioning my own sanity, wondering if I had imagined the building changing around me. One evening, I saw movement in the hallway outside my door. Two figures, tall, indistinct, gliding with impossible precision. I froze. They didn't knock, didn't speak, didn't even seem aware of me. Yet every instinct screamed they were observing, waiting, measuring me. The next night, I heard furniture scraping in the empty apartment. Chairs moving, tables tilting. Every sound carefully orchestrated, patient, deliberate. Their presence filled the entire building, as if the apartment itself had become alive, observing, calculating. Sleep became impossible. Dreams were invaded. Figures appeared at impossible angles, walking down hallways that didn't exist. Voices whispered secrets I had never told anyone, yet knew intimately. My private thoughts mirrored, manipulated, cataloged. I attempted to leave. The lobby stretched impossibly. Stairwells bent into strange geometries. I felt their gaze following, even when I looked away. The building itself seemed to respond to their attention, warping, reshaping, bending physics around their presence. I tried talking to neighbors in other units. No one saw or heard them. Only I could perceive the subtle signs, shadows, whispers, shifting objects, impossible reflections. It was as if my perception had been singled out for infiltration. I began seeing them in mirrors and windows, always at angles that defied logic. Their faces blurred, shifting subtly, sometimes showing my own features. They didn't speak, but their awareness was palpable, cataloging my every gesture. Attempts to confront them directly failed. I shouted into the hallways. Silence. Their presence intensified when I turned my back. Subtle vibrations in the floor, tiny creaks and shifts in the walls. Patience. Infinite patience. Time distorted. Days bled together. Nights stretched into endless hours. I began forgetting what had been real, what I had imagined. Every corner, every reflection, every empty doorway became suspect. They had claimed the building, and by extension, my life. Objects moved in synchronization with them. A chair slid across the floor when I wasn't looking. Drawers opened slightly. A pen rolled off my desk. Every subtle shift felt orchestrated, deliberate, testing my awareness, bending my sense of control. I tried fleeing again. Streets warped. Sidewalks curved impossibly. Even outside, their awareness seemed to follow, bending perception to ensure I could never truly escape. Windows reflected figures where none existed. Shadows stretched unnaturally. I began talking to myself, attempting to anchor reality. Yet even my words were mirrored subtly, twisted, rewritten in reflections. They were patient, always observing, teaching me a lesson in subtle control. Finally, I accepted it. Resistance was impossible. The building, the neighbors, the shadows, all one. They existed beyond movement, beyond time, beyond comprehension. My routines, my thoughts, my awareness, cataloged, mirrored, folded into their presence. Tonight, I hear soft laughter from the empty unit. Shadows stretch toward my door. Objects subtly move. Their presence is patient, intelligent, infinite. And I know I will never forget the neighbors who I don't remember moving in. The stranger in my dreams that followed me home. It began as a dream. A shadowy figure at the edge of my vision, watching me silently. I turned, blinked, and it was gone. The feeling lingered long after waking, a residue of unease I could not shake. The first morning, I felt watched. Not by anyone present, but by something that had already slipped past the boundary between sleep and waking. My apartment felt subtly altered, as if my home remembered what I had dreamed. The second night, it returned, in vivid clarity. Standing in a dimly lit corridor, impossible angles stretching around it. Its form blurred, indistinct, yet unmistakably human. It followed me silently, watching, waiting, patient and deliberate. I tried to dismiss it as a nightmare. Yet each morning, subtle changes haunted my apartment. Objects shifted slightly from where I remembered leaving them. Shadows lingered longer than they should. The air carried a faint, impossible tension. If you're still listening, subscribe before your dreams decide to follow you home. The stranger began speaking, but only in whispers I heard in my head. Secrets, fears, fragments of thoughts I had not yet formed. It did not move, did not step closer, yet its presence was infinite, overwhelming, impossible to ignore. Sleep became a battleground. Each night, my dreams warped. Rooms stretched impossibly, hallways twisted. It followed, always in impossible angles, patiently observing my reactions. Every fear, every hesitation catalogued and reflected back to me. I tried grounding myself. Bright lights, constant noise, mental exercises. None worked. The stranger was persistent, moving effortlessly through the fabric of my perception. The line between dreaming and waking blurred. Objects in the apartment began responding to its presence. Cups tilted, chairs slid, lights flickered in rhythm with my heartbeat. Even when I turned away, I could feel its awareness, patient, intelligent, inevitable. I tried recording it. Cameras captured empty spaces. Video playback showed nothing. Yet every time I looked in mirrors or reflective surfaces, I glimpsed the figure, grinning faintly, its eyes impossibly deep. I began noticing patterns. Its appearances mirrored my routines, anticipating my actions. Every gesture I made in waking life was reflected subtly in my dreams, orchestrated by a being whose patience exceeded human comprehension. One night, I tried to confront it. "Who are you?" I whispered aloud. My voice echoed oddly. The figure tilted its head, form blurring further. The whispers in my mind became coherent. "I have always followed. I have always known. You cannot hide." Time warped. Days became nights. Nights became weeks. My perception of space bent. My apartment stretched into impossible corridors, walls bending at angles my mind should not comprehend. Yet always, the stranger followed, always observing, patient. I began seeing it in reflections everywhere. Windows, mirrors, the dark screens of my devices. Always there, smiling faintly, waiting. Always whispering secrets I hadn't yet spoken, fears I hadn't yet realized, memories I hadn't yet had. Attempts to flee were futile. I drove, I walked, I slept elsewhere. In every reflective surface, it appeared, grinning faintly. My home, my mind, my reality, all had become its domain. The stranger learned me. Every reaction, every hesitation, catalogued and stored. Every fear anticipated, every secret known. I felt it in the air, in the shadows, in every moment of waking awareness. I tried to ignore it, but the whispers grew louder. Not just in dreams. In brief flashes during the day, a thought that was not mine, a fragment of a voice in the corner of my hearing. Patient, intelligent, omnipresent. I documented everything. Notes shifted subtly, altered when I wasn't looking. Reflections warped. Objects moved imperceptibly. The stranger's awareness extended into every corner, bending reality around its patient observation. Sleep became optional. Consciousness itself stretched, folding around the presence that had followed me home. Dreams and waking life intertwined. Its whispers became commands, gentle, patient, precise, urging thoughts I did not intend to have. I realized resistance was impossible. Awareness alone was submission. My own mind had become a medium for its presence. Every step, every gesture, every private thought, catalogued, mirrored, twisted into subtle lessons in inevitability. I tried leading once more. Streets curved impossibly. Sidewalks stretched. Buildings bent. In every reflective surface, the stranger watched, waited, smiled faintly. Escape was impossible. Its patience was infinite. Its awareness absolute. The stranger began appearing in dreams deliberately timed with real-world events. Footsteps in the apartment mirrored dream movements. Doors creaked in rhythm with its presence. Shadows stretched and twisted, echoing its form. Reality itself seemed subordinate. I attempted to speak aloud, question, demand. Silence answered. Only whispers in my head, subtle, precise, patient. I realized I could no longer distinguish between the stranger and myself, between observer and observed. The stranger taught patience, taught inevitability. It showed me that resistance was a luxury I no longer possessed. My thoughts, my fears, my awareness, all belonged to it now, cataloged and folded into a presence beyond comprehension. Tonight, I sit in my apartment, lights dim, reflections everywhere. I feel the weight of its gaze. It whispers, not loudly, not angrily, but with infinite patience, recounting fears I haven't yet realized, secrets I haven't yet remembered. And I know it has always been here. And I know it will never leave. And I know that the stranger in my dreams now follows me in every waking moment. The silent guest sitting in my living room. It began with the sound of a chair sliding across the floor. I lived alone, yet when I stepped into my living room, the armchair by the window had turned slightly, angled toward the hallway where I stood. I thought little of it at first. Maybe I had brushed against it earlier. Maybe I had forgotten moving it myself. Yet that night, as I passed through the room again, I swore the angle had shifted further. The second evening, I noticed something else. An indentation in the cushion. The shape was too defined, too heavy, like someone had been sitting there for hours. I stared at it, unsettled, but forced myself to walk away. By the third night, I stopped pretending. The chair was always angled toward the hallway, waiting. The cushion sank lower, deeper, as if the invisible weight pressing it down had grown heavier. The air in the room tasted thick, metallic. If you're still here, subscribe before something decides to take a seat in your home. I tried ignoring it, sat on the couch, turned on the TV, but the air behind me felt occupied, too dense, too alive. Each flicker of the screen reflected something I didn't dare turn to face. Objects shifted subtly. A coaster slid across the table. A lamp cord twisted. The curtains shifted without wind. Always in rhythm, always in sync with the unspoken presence of the silent guest that had made my living room its domain. I stopped entering the room at night. But no matter how I avoided it, I felt watched. The weight of eyes pressing into my back, into my chest, into my skull. Patient, silent, waiting. I began sleeping in my bedroom with the door closed. But every morning, the chair's angle was different, pointed directly at my door, as if whatever sat in it spent the entire night watching me breathe. I placed cameras in the living room, watched the footage back in the morning. Nothing moved. The chair stayed angled, the cushion stayed indented. But I swore I saw shadows stretch unnaturally long when the footage flickered at 3 a.m. I tried rearranging the furniture, turning the chair against the wall. The next day, it was back in its place, angled toward the hallway. The cushion heavier than ever, sagging deeply as if someone never left it. I asked aloud, half mocking, half terrified, "Who's there?" My words sounded thin in the heavy silence. The air pressed harder, thicker, as if my question had been acknowledged but not answered. Nights grew longer. I stopped sleeping entirely. I sat awake, listening. Sometimes I heard breathing from the living room, slow, measured, impossibly deep. Other times, faint scratching, as though nails traced patterns into the chair's fabric. I moved out briefly, stayed at a friend's. Yet when I returned, the chair was still angled, the cushion still pressed, the air still heavy. My absence had changed nothing. The silent guest had waited patiently, unbothered by time. Mirrors reflected more than they should. Passing by the hallway mirror, I glimpsed faint outlines of someone in the chair, blurred, indistinct, but there, always angled toward me, always silent. I considered throwing the chair out, dragging it to the curb, setting it on fire. Yet every attempt dissolved before action. Something in my chest tightened, whispering resistance, urging me to leave it alone. The guest had claimed it. The presence began to spread. Other chairs shifted slightly, objects rearranged, cushions pressed. Yet always, the armchair remained the center, the throne of the silent guest, the nexus of its patience. I tried leaving offerings, food, drink, candles. Nothing changed. The cushion sagged heavier, deeper. The silence grew denser. The air in my apartment vibrated with low frequency, pressing into my body until I could barely breathe. Sometimes, late at night, I heard the creak of the chair, slow, deliberate. The sound of shifting weight, of someone leaning forward. My skin crawled. I held my breath, waiting. Silence returned. I began noticing changes in myself. Thoughts felt altered. Dreams bent around the image of the chair, always occupied by something I could not see. My waking mind carried the same weight, heavy, suffocating, patient. Neighbors asked why lights in my apartment flickered at odd hours. I had no answer. They laughed nervously, said they saw movement behind the curtains. I said nothing. Their eyes lingered, suspicious, worried. I spoke aloud again, trembling. "What do you want?" No answer, only silence so deep it roared. The air vibrated, thick with a presence that was not sound, not language, but a patient, infinite awareness. I stopped using the living room, sealed the doorway with furniture. Yet every morning, the blockade shifted, and the chair stood in perfect view, angled toward me, cushions sagging under impossible weight. Sleep deprivation blurred everything. I swore I saw figures reflected in the TV screen when it was off. Not one, but several, all gathered around the chair, watching me through the glass. The guest was no longer alone. The atmosphere in my apartment changed, heavier, more crowded. The silence carried layers, subtle textures of breathing, shuffling, movements too faint to hear, but too obvious to ignore. Every corner whispered occupation. Shadows bent wrong. Objects tilted when I wasn't watching. The silent guest had multiplied, its patience spreading, replicating into presences that all sat watching me from the living room. The chair was no longer just furniture. It was an altar, a throne, a doorway. Something had claimed my space, and I knew with horrifying clarity that my role was no longer resident, but host. I understood the truth too late. The silent guest had never been an intruder. I was. The apartment had never been mine. The lease, the furniture, the walls, all illusions of ownership. The chair had simply reminded me who truly lived here. Tonight, as I write this, I feel them watching. Not just one, but many. The living room vibrates with silent attention. The chair sags low, impossibly deep, as if the unseen occupant has leaned forward. Ready? I cannot leave. My legs refuse. My chest is too heavy. The air tastes metallic. The silence is deafening, roaring, suffocating. The chair creaks softly, rhythmically, as if someone has finally decided to rise. And I know with certainty now, the guest was never silent. I was. And tonight, the silence ends. The phone calls from my own number. It started with a ring at 2:17 in the morning. My phone lit up on the nightstand, vibrating against the wood, the screen glowing with one word that froze my blood. The incoming call was from my own number. Half asleep, I stared at the display. The digits were unmistakable. My number, my name, my phone was calling itself. For a long moment I just watched, breath held, heartbeat thundering. Against my better judgment, I answered. The silence was absolute. Then faintly, I heard breathing. Slow, steady, drawn out in a way that was undeniably human. I whispered, "Hello?" My own voice answered back, perfect in tone and cadence. "Don't hang up." I dropped the phone, chest tightening. The line stayed open, my voice echoing faintly from the speaker, urging me not to end the call. My double whispered words too soft to catch, as if muttering secrets just beyond hearing. The call ended on its own. My phone screen went dark. My apartment felt altered, heavier, like something unseen had stepped across a threshold while I lay paralyzed in bed. Sleep never returned that night, only trembling exhaustion. The next evening, 2:17 in the morning. Exactly, the call came again. This time I didn't answer. I watched the screen vibrate with my own number flashing endlessly. When it stopped, a voicemail notification appeared. Hands shaking, I pressed play. It was me, my voice whispering, "You can't keep ignoring me." The words stretched, distorted, layered beneath faint static. In the background, I swore I heard movement. A chair creaking, a door opening, footsteps echoing in my apartment. If you're still here, subscribe before your phone ever dares to call you back. After that, the calls multiplied. Always at 2:17, always from my number. Sometimes 2 calls, sometimes 5. The voicemails grew stranger, my voice pleading, laughing, sometimes crying, sometimes whispering things I didn't remember ever saying aloud. Friends didn't believe me. They said it was a glitch, a spoof, an app. I tried blocking my own number, but the calls still came. I smashed the phone one night, bought a new one the next day. The first night, the new phone rang. Same number. My number. No contacts, no SIM transfer, no link to the old device. Yet somehow, it already knew me. It already carried my voice. It already belonged to the caller. The voicemails became layered. My voice spoke over itself, multiple versions whispering at once. Some angry, some mocking, some sobbing quietly. Each recording carried tones of me I had never expressed, emotions I had never fully felt. It wasn't just calls anymore. I woke one night to see the phone camera on, recording without permission. The footage showed me sleeping, chest rising and falling, while faint whispers bled through the audio. My voice narrating my dreams. Other recordings appeared in my gallery. Blurred images of my apartment hallways, empty rooms, and reflections in mirrors that didn't align with my movements. In one clip, my reflection moved after I had already left the frame. I tried turning the phone off, removing the battery. Yet at 2:17, the screen flickered back on. The call came, my number glowing bright, my double waiting patiently on the other end of the line. I stopped answering. That's when the texts began. Sent from my number, each one precise, calculated, cruel. I see you. You're not alone. Stop pretending you're the real one. Each text carried a weight of undeniable authenticity. The messages escalated. You've stolen my life. You're sleeping in my bed. I want it back. My hands trembled reading them. My voice echoed inside my skull, as though the texts weren't written, but spoken directly into me. Neighbors began noticing things. They said they heard me pacing at night, talking loudly through the walls. They swore they saw me in the hallway when I wasn't there. One neighbor joked that there were two of me living here. I laughed nervously, but inside, I knew the truth. The calls weren't warnings. They were rehearsals. Whoever was on the other end wasn't just imitating me. It was becoming me, piece by piece, voice by voice, gesture by gesture. One voicemail chilled me most. My voice said, "You need to stop resisting. It's easier if you let me in." The background wasn't static this time. It was my own laugh, loud and unrestrained, echoing in an empty room. Sleep became impossible. I began unplugging the phone, locking it in drawers, even placing it in the freezer. None of it mattered. At 2:17, the ringing came. Sometimes muffled, sometimes distant, but always loud enough to hear. I started dreaming of conversations with myself. Two versions of me sitting in a room, one smiling, one silent. The smiling one always leaned forward and whispered, "You're not the original. That's why you're afraid to answer." The line between waking and dreaming blurred. I caught myself speaking words I didn't intend. My mouth formed sentences that weren't my own. I heard myself answering questions no one had asked. My reflection lingered half a second too long. I tried destroying the phone again. This time, I didn't replace it. Yet at 2:17, my landline rang. When I checked the caller ID, it was my number. My cell phone's number. The device I had destroyed completely. I answered, desperate. My voice laughed at me, cruel and hollow. "You don't get it, do you? You were never holding the phone. I was." Static surged. My apartment lights flickered. For a moment, I thought I saw myself. Another me, standing in the doorway, smiling faintly, phone in hand. The call cut. The hallway was empty, but the air still vibrated with static, my ears ringing with echoes of my own laugh. I haven't slept in days. The calls still come, though I no longer own a phone. Sometimes they come through the television, sometimes through the hum of the refrigerator, sometimes whispered directly into my ear as I sit frozen. Every voice is mine, every laugh, every threat, every sob. I don't know which version is real anymore. I don't know if I'm the one who answered the call or the one who made it. Tonight, I heard the phone ring again. No device, no screen, no number flashing. Just the sound echoing from inside my chest, vibrating in my ribs. My own heartbeat carrying the call forward, waiting for me to respond. I think I already did.